So, frankly, the main attraction at Ohio State's Pro Day today, Wednesday, at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center was not guys who are about to be drafted into the NFL. Marvin Harrison Jr. was not working out. A lot of Ohio State's most premium NFL prospects that we thought might be around this year are sticking around at Ohio State. They're going to be back here next year, and some of them were working out today. JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer were getting in on some things, but the main attraction today was quarterbacks. We finally got to see Will Howard and Devin Brown throw some balls downfield. We'd seen them throw on air somewhat in the first couple of practices of the spring. This was a more extended look at some of the things that they could do. And I guess, Steven, just what was your big impression of watching those guys throw a little bit more and throw especially a little bit more downfield today, still on air?
Devin Brown has a strong arm, and he absolutely wants you to know he has a strong arm. I thought, and it's because it's on air, right? And it's quiet in here because it's a pro day, so you hear everything. You kind of heard the ball coming off his hands and a little of that zip. It wasn't always what I would call a catchable ball. That's a phrase that's used a lot. That was used with C.J. Stroud a lot. But it's strong and it's there. While with Will Howard, maybe more catchable of a ball. And that means it's a minimal part of this whole equation that we're talking about and picking who Ohio State's next starting quarterback to be. But I did notice that arm strength, if I had to rank the two right now, I'd probably go Devin Brown as number one. But also, arm strength is not always a great thing depending on what type of throw you're trying to make, especially you're throwing on air. Imagine that with defenders and pads and everything else brought into the equation.
Yeah, it's not just about power, it's about touch, and I thought both of them showed okay touch on some of those deep balls and things like that. We're talking to Will Howard a little bit after the workouts today, and it was said that he and Devin Brown were joking about, because I asked him, like, does it feel like you guys are just always competing, like you're always under scrutiny? And he was joking. He said, like, yeah, like Devin said, kind of talking about us, said, I bet they'll find out who the starting quarterback is today based on them throwing on air in a thing that isn't even really about them. And they were just joking, having some fun at our expense, but everybody kind of gets it. I was asking Xavier Johnson about it later and about how the scrutiny of the quarterback position is unique and also kind of deserved. So are we making too much about things like today, or do you come out of today, Andrew, seeing some of the differences between who these quarterbacks are right now?
I care nothing about the throwing that happened today. Sorry. I mean, you're talking about Cade Stover. He's about to play in the NFL. Xavier Johnson's about to play in the NFL. None of these dudes are going to play with Will Howard. None of these dudes are going to play with Devin Brown this week when they have practice or next year when they play games. So I don't particularly care about that. I did notice the size difference. I think that is notable. I remember right when everything ended, we're kind of milling about, and I saw this just massive pile of people, and somebody was standing next to me, and they went, well, whoever's getting interviewed is really short, because we could barely see their head, and we thought that they were standing. And Will Howard was kind of sitting down, and we were like, oh, Will, this is a big boy. And when you're just kind of around him, you see how he stacks up, not just to Devin Brown, but Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, and the size of Will Howard is really interesting. So I just think the zip with his throws is notable, but again, it's the size difference, and that is what you come away with, because you're like, man, if this guy's this big in shorts and a t-shirt, what's he gonna look like in pads? So again, the passing, who cares? I care more about their chemistry and their routes and how he looks in pads with Carnell Tate and with Jeremiah Smith and with Brandon Inniss than I do with Xavier Johnson and Cade Stover. And just again, when you look at those two guys, you definitely do see a physical difference.
Yeah, it's funny. It reminds me a little bit of when I remember going to a Bears-Steelers game one time and seeing Ben Roethlisberger on the field for the first time, standing live and standing next to linemen. And you're like, oh yeah, Big Ben. That's where that comes from. There's a little bit of that with him. He's not. I don't think he's quite Roethlisberger size, but he is a big guy. We talked to him afterwards. He said that second spring practice, which is when I think a lot of us had started to. It was starting to look favorable for Devin Brown, partially for what Devin Brown had done and how comfortable he looked. Will Howard said that second spring practice was the worst he's ever thrown routes on air in his life, and it just so happens to be that's a day that we're in there and we extrapolate things when we see it. And it's just one day and it's early in the spring. But I thought he looked more comfortable today than he looked that first week, and again, it's different stakes. It's not even actually a real practice. And I thought Devin Brown continued some of just the poise, which is a difference than what I thought we saw from him in preseason football last year. So long way to go with both of these guys, but every time we get to see them throw, it's going to be something to us because we don't get to see it that often. It's going to be short windows, and today was one of those days. We were texting about it. Get those, 614-350-3315. The next time we are back in the Woody to watch a practice, that's where we'll be sending you information and analysis, everything we see and hear from cleveland.com.